The morning light breaks over a calm suburban street, golden rays glinting off the polished hood of a sleek black sedan. It's the kind of car that turns heads, elegant, powerful, and unapologetically expensive. But today, that shine will catch the wrong kind of attention. What happens when prejudice meets power and judgment collides with reality? What happens when an assumption is shattered by truth in full uniform? You're about to find out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Swift Tale, the channel where we bring you incredible real-life stories that challenge perspectives, spark emotion, and leave you thinking long after the video ends. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you for stopping by. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story like this one. And let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever been judged for something you had no control over? The way you look, the car you drive, or the neighborhood you're in? Today's story dives into exactly that kind of moment, one that starts like an ordinary traffic stop, but unfolds into something unforgettable. It's a story about assumption and revelation, about how a split second of judgment can be turned upside down when truth walks out of the driver's seat. A black woman, on her way to a morning meeting, is pulled over because her car seems too nice for someone like her, at least in the officer's eyes. But when she steps out of the vehicle in full U.S. Army Colonel uniform, everything changes. The power dynamics shift, the tone of the encounter transforms, and the silence that follows says more than words ever could. This story matters not just because it's dramatic, but because it's real in more ways than one. It speaks to experiences that countless people face every day, being judged before being understood, labeled before being known. It shines a light on the quiet forms of bias that still linger in everyday life, and how dignity, discipline, and self-respect can turn an uncomfortable encounter into a lesson in humanity. Throughout this video, we'll walk through every moment, from the ordinary calm before the stop, to the tense exchange between driver and officer, to the breathtaking reveal that left the officers speechless. We'll explore how this one encounter rippled beyond a single street corner to become a reminder of why empathy and awareness matter more than ever. So sit back, relax, and get ready for a powerful tale that blends truth, emotion, and inspiration, a story that might just change how you see the world. Because here on Swift Tale, we don't just tell stories, we bring you lessons wrapped in real moments that reveal the best, and sometimes the worst, of human nature. Now let's dive in. The morning sun climbed slowly above the horizon, painting the sky with hues of peach and gold. Birds sang softly across manicured lawns as sprinklers hissed in rhythmic bursts, casting a fine mist that caught the early light like scattered diamonds. The air was peaceful, one of those quiet mornings when the world seems to pause between moments, calm and unhurried. For Colonel Maya Richardson, this was just another drive to work. She had her coffee in one hand, her uniform perfectly pressed, and a mind already focused on the day ahead. Her black Mercedes-Benz purred smoothly down the road, the kind of car that reflected both success and quiet pride. Years of hard work, deployments overseas, long nights spent leading troops, and the unrelenting discipline of service had earned her this life. To her, it wasn't luxury, it was a reminder of perseverance. But to someone watching from a distance, it might tell a different story, one clouded by assumption rather than understanding. A few blocks away, Officer James Collins sat in his patrol car, parked at the corner of Maple Avenue. His coffee had long gone cold, his eyes half-lidded from another uneventful morning shift. The town he patrolled was quiet, safe, predictable, but as the black Mercedes glided past, something in his mind clicked. Maybe it was the car's tinted windows, or maybe it was his own preconceptions whispering in his ear. He straightened up, flicked on his dash camera, and muttered something under his breath. "That's not a car you usually see around here." As the Mercedes turned onto Oak Street, Collins followed. At first, it was just curiosity, but curiosity has a way of blending with bias until the two are hard to tell apart. He noticed the driver's skin tone reflected in her side mirror and made a quick judgment without even realizing it. To him, it was routine procedure, but deep down, something more subtle was at play. Inside the car, Maya noticed the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank, not from fear, but from frustration. This wasn't the first time she'd been pulled over for something trivial. She knew the script by heart, the polite smile, the careful words, the hands visible on the wheel. Years of training had taught her composure under pressure, but nothing quite prepared her for the quiet indignity of being suspected for existing in the wrong car, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. She took a deep breath and eased the car to the side of the road. The rhythmic hum of the engine faded, replaced by the crunch of tires on gravel. The early peace of the morning seemed to dissolve as the patrol car stopped behind her, red and blue lights washing across her rear window. Officer Collins adjusted his sunglasses and checked his reflection in the side mirror. He wasn't nervous, not yet, but his pulse quickened as he stepped out of his vehicle. Maybe it was the weight of authority, maybe habit. Either way, he convinced himself this was just standard procedure. But as he approached the driver's side window, the world would soon remind him that assumptions carry consequences. Meanwhile, inside her car, Colonel Richardson calmly turned down the radio and whispered to herself, "Stay calm, Maya, you've handled worse." And indeed, she had battlefields, chaos, loss, command decisions that carried lives in their balance. But somehow this quiet moment on an American street always carried a sting that even a war hero could never quite ignore. The street was still, yet heavy with unspoken tension. Neighbors peered through blinds, pretending not to watch. A jogger slowed to a walk, curiosity flickering across his face. To them, it was just another traffic stop. To Maya, it was something more, another test of patience, another moment where she'd have to prove she belonged. As Officer Collins neared the car, one hand resting on his belt, the stage was set. Two people from two worlds, about to collide in a single moment of misunderstanding, one fueled by duty, the other by quiet endurance. Neither yet knew that what was about to happen would not only change their perception of each other, but would echo far beyond this sunlit street. The crunch of gravel echoed as Officer Collins approached the black Mercedes, his boots slow and deliberate against the pavement. The faint crackle of his radio was the only other sound. The morning calm that had once filled the neighborhood was now replaced by a taut silence, as if even the wind was holding its breath. The red and blue lights pulsed rhythmically across the car's polished surface, reflections of authority and accusation all at once. Inside, Colonel Maya Richardson sat perfectly still, her fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel, both hands visible, calm, poised, and unflinchingly professional. Her training kicked in automatically, the same discipline that had carried her through the ranks and across battlefields. She rolled down her window, the soft hum of the glass descending like a signal that the performance was about to begin, one she'd been forced to rehearse too many times. "Good morning, officer," she said evenly, her tone steady but polite. Collins tilted his head, sizing her up. "License and registration, please," he said, the words practiced, almost mechanical. His eyes, however, told a different story, flicking between her face, her uniform blouse beneath a civilian jacket, and the car's sleek interior. "Yes, sir," she replied, retrieving the documents with slow, deliberate movements, making sure every motion was visible. She learned long ago that too quick movements could be misunderstood. Her military ID peeked out from her wallet, but she didn't offer it, not yet. Collins examined the registration, his brow furrowing slightly. "This car registered to you?" he asked. "Yes, it is," she replied, still calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" He hesitated, as if caught off guard by her composure. "Just a routine stop," he said finally. "You were driving a little slow through the neighborhood." His voice betrayed a flicker of uncertainty, the kind that appears when someone's excuse doesn't quite line up with their real reason. Maya didn't respond immediately. She knew what routine meant in moments like these. Instead, she nodded politely. "I see. Was I emptying traffic?" He glanced around, empty street, no other cars. "No, ma'am, just checking things out." For a brief second, their eyes met, his filled with unspoken judgment, hers with quiet resolve. The tension wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like static in the air before a storm. He didn't see a decorated officer with decades of service. He saw a stereotype shaped by years of conditioning. And she, with quiet dignity, refused to give that stereotype any power. As Collins continued his inspection, his radio crackled to life, with a distant voice calling in another patrol. He didn't answer right away. Something in his gut told him there was more to this woman, something that didn't fit the assumptions he'd already made. Meanwhile, Maya's mind wandered briefly, not in fear, but in reflection. She thought of the young soldiers she'd mentored, how she always told them to stand tall under pressure. Grace, she used to say, is strength under control. Now, sitting on the side of the road, she was living her own lesson. Collins stepped back slightly, glancing once more at the license before looking up. "You in a hurry somewhere?" he asked, his tone softening but still guarded. The patrol car door slammed shut behind Officer Collins, breaking the uneasy quiet that had settled over the street. He had just finished running the plates. Everything came back clean, registration valid, no outstanding tickets. By all logic, this stop should have been over already. But logic was what drove him anymore. Something deeper and more dangerous was. As he approached the car again, his expression had changed. The uncertainty in his eyes had hardened into something more defensive, as if he were trying to justify the stop to himself. He rested one hand on his belt and leaned slightly toward the open window. "Ma'am, are you sure this vehicle is yours?" Colonel Richardson blinked, slowly turning to face him. Her voice was calm but firm. "Officer, you just ran my license and registration. Both are valid, aren't they?" He hesitated. "Yes, ma'am, but—" "But what?" she interrupted softly, her tone controlled but edged with quiet steel. "You said this was a routine stop. Is there another reason you're detaining me?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge. Collins shifted his weight, feeling the invisible weight of his own bias pressing down. "It's just that, well, people don't usually drive cars like this around here," he muttered. She tilted her head, almost sadly. "People like me, you mean?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. Maya exhaled, steady and deliberate. Years of military service had taught her that confrontation wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet control that unsettled people the most. "Officer," she said finally, "I've complied with every request you've made. I've shown you my identification, my registration, and I've been respectful. Now, if there's no legal reason to detain me, I'd like to be on my way." Collins swallowed hard. His authority felt smaller now, fragile in the face of her poise. But instead of stepping back, he took a half step forward, clinging to the role that made him feel in control. "Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle," he said, his tone clipped and official. The words hit like a spark in dry grass. For a moment, even the air seemed to tense. Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached down and unbuckled her seatbelt with slow precision. Her movements were deliberate, not defiant, just measured, confident. As she opened the door and stepped out, sunlight caught the edge of her jacket, revealing the hint of military insignia beneath. The crispness of her posture, the steadiness in her gaze, they spoke of command, of discipline, of someone used to leading. Collins wasn't ready for that. He expected hesitation or compliance, not authority, not this quiet strength that radiated from her without a single raised word. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked again, this time standing fully upright beside the car. Her voice carried something new now, not confrontation, but command, the kind that makes soldiers stop mid-stride. Collins felt his confidence falter, though he tried not to show it. "Just following procedure," he muttered, eyes darting from her face to the faint glint of rank he still hadn't recognized for what it was. "Procedure," she repeated softly, almost to herself. "I'm familiar with that term." The street was utterly still. The jogger from earlier had stopped across the road, pretending to tie his shoe, but watching every second. A curtain moved in a nearby window. The world had narrowed to this one encounter, a quiet battlefield between perception and truth. Maya's patience was running thin, but she kept her composure. "Officer," she said evenly, "before this goes any further, I think it's only fair that you know who you're speaking to." He frowned. "And who might that be?" Her eyes didn't waver. "Colonel Maya Richardson, United States Army." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Collins blinked, confused, then his gaze dropped to the small insignia on her chest, half hidden under the edge of her jacket. The gold eagle of a full-bird colonel gleamed in the sunlight, undeniable and proud. It was as if the world tilted slightly. The balance of power, The unspoken hierarchy that had existed between them just seconds ago dissolved in an instant. Collins froze, realization flooding his face. "Ma'am, Colonel, I didn't." Her tone remained steady, controlled. "You didn't know," she finished for him. "I understand." But there was something in her eyes, a quiet sadness, a tired kind of disappointment that said she had known. She'd seen this before, too many times. The silence stretched on, heavy and humbling. The tension that had filled the air didn't explode. It simply evaporated under the weight of truth. In that moment, the story turned. The confrontation had reached its peak, and the revelation had begun. What came next would test both of them, one learning the cost of assumption and the other showing the power of grace under fire. "I have a meeting," she said simply, "at the base." "The base?" He blinked, surprised. "Which base?" "Fort Lewis." She watched him closely. "I'm stationed there." He nodded, unsure how to respond. Something about her calm, direct tone unsettled him, not confrontational, but firm in a way he wasn't used to encountering. He had expected nervousness, excuses, maybe irritation. Instead, he found composure and quiet authority. "All right," he muttered, stepping back toward his patrol car. "Stay put for a moment." As he walked away, Maya exhaled quietly, her eyes following him through the rearview mirror. She knew what was coming next, the check, the call, the silent judgment behind the computer screen. Still, she waited patiently, her posture unbroken, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the lights continued to flash, red and blue against her black car, like a silent confrontation between two kinds of power. What Officer Collins didn't know, and what he was moments away from learning, was that the woman he'd just profiled had more medals on her chest than he had stripes on his sleeve. The air grew heavier, the moment stretching like a drawn breath. One simple action, a stop that should have lasted 5 minutes, was about to become something neither of them would ever forget. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The soft hum of the engines, the faint whisper of wind against the trees, everything else seemed to fade into silence. Officer Collins's breath hitched as his eyes caught the glint of gold beneath the woman's jacket. What he'd mistaken for a decorative pin was now unmistakable, a full-bird colonel insignia, gleaming in the morning light like a challenge. Colonel Maya Richardson stood perfectly still, her posture a study in control. She had learned long ago that true strength didn't need to be loud. It spoke in calm tones and steady eyes. She adjusted the front of her jacket, revealing the uniform beneath, neatly pressed, perfectly aligned, every detail immaculate. It wasn't a show of arrogance. It was a quiet reminder of earned authority. When she finally spoke, her voice carried that same composed gravity that could command an entire room or an entire battalion. "Officer," she said, "I'm Colonel Maya Richardson, United States Army, serial number ending in 2741. I can present my military identification if that will help clarify who I am." The officer's words caught in his throat. His mind scrambled for footing as if the ground beneath him had shifted. The stern confidence that had guided him only moments ago had evaporated, replaced by the sinking realization that he had made a very human and very public mistake. I didn't realize," Collins began, his voice faltering. Maya's expression didn't change. "Didn't realize what?" she asked, her tone even not cruel, but cutting in its precision. He hesitated, fumbling for words that wouldn't come. "Didn't realize who you were." Her gaze didn't waver. "And if I weren't who I am, officer, would that have changed how you treated me?" The question hit harder than any accusation. It was quiet, rhetorical, but its weight landed squarely between them. The truth didn't need volume to be heard. It was written in the air between them, in the sudden heaviness of the moment, in the way Collins's face went pale with understanding. He stammered, "No, ma'am, I didn't mean any disrespect." Maya nodded slowly. "I believe you didn't mean to," she said, her tone still controlled. "But intent doesn't erase impact. You see, what might have felt like just another stop to you carries a different meaning when it happens again and again to people who look like me." Collins swallowed hard. The red and blue lights reflected across his uniform, a stark contrast to the gold on hers. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The woman he had presumed to question now stood before him as someone who outranked him in every sense, professionally, morally, and spiritually. For a long moment, he didn't know what to do with his hands, his voice, or his authority. "Colonel, I'm sorry," he managed. "I truly am." Her features softened just slightly. "Apology accepted," she said, then added, "But remember this, Officer Collins, respect shouldn't depend on recognition. You didn't have to know my title to know my worth." That sentence hung in the air like a final verdict. There was no anger in it, no vengeance, just truth. And sometimes truth was the hardest thing to face. Collins nodded, eyes down, a flush of shame creeping up his neck. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly, "you're absolutely right." Maya's eyes lingered on him for a moment, assessing, not punishing. She saw something shift behind his expression, understanding, real, unfiltered understanding. And though part of her wanted to leave him with his discomfort, another part, the leader, the teacher in her, recognized the opportunity in this moment. She took a small step closer, lowering her voice. "I've served this country for 23 years, she said. "I've seen soldiers from every background risk everything for each other. Out there, we don't see skin color, accent, or income. We see commitment. We see character. That's what respect should look like, even here, even on a quiet street like this." Her words hit him harder than any reprimand could have. Collins's throat tightened. For the first time, he saw not just the rank or the car or the situation, he saw her. A woman who had carried a nation's flag on her shoulder, who had worn sacrifice like armor, now forced to defend her right just to drive home in peace. "I understand," he said softly. She shook her head, her tone gentle but firm. "No, officer, you're beginning to." Collins dropped his gaze, taking a slow step back. The authority in his stance melted away, replaced by humility. "Thank you for your service," he murmured, the phrase sounding less like a cliché and more like a confession. Maya gave a single, measured nod. "Thank you for listening," she said simply. Then she opened her car door and paused. "And officer, next time you stop someone, see the person first." With that, she slid back into the driver's seat. The quiet click of the door closing felt like the end of something, not just the encounter, but the illusion of control that had started it. Collins stepped back toward his patrol car, his reflection caught in the Mercedes's polished door, two figures side by side, one learning humility, the other embodying grace. As she drove off, the sunlight glinted once more off the colonel's insignia, fading slowly into the distance. For a while he stood there, hands resting on his belt, watching the car disappear. The words she'd spoken replayed in his mind again and again, respect shouldn't depend on recognition. In that moment, the uniform he wore felt a little heavier. The air was still after she drove away. The flashing lights had gone dark, leaving the street washed in quiet daylight again. The faint smell of exhaust lingered for a moment, and then even that was gone. Officer Collins stood beside his patrol car, motionless, staring down the empty road. For the first time that morning, he could hear his own breathing, slow, uneven, heavy with the weight of realization. The sound of his radio crackling to life barely registered. He reached for it, hesitated, and then turned the volume down. There was nothing to report, not officially anyway. He leaned against the hood of his cruiser, the cool metal pressing against his palms. A moment ago, he had been certain, confident in his instincts, secure in his authority. But now, he felt stripped bare, his judgment laid open like a wound. The words the colonel had spoken echoed in his head, circling over and over. Respect shouldn't depend on recognition. He rubbed his temples, remembering the look in her eyes, calm, disappointed, but not cruel. There had been grace in her restraint, and that only deepened his discomfort. She could have called him out, could have demanded accountability, could have humiliated him in front of the world. Instead, she'd chosen to teach him. "Damn," he muttered under his breath, the word barely audible. "I messed that up." It wasn't the kind of mistake that earned a citation or a reprimand. It was the kind that forced you to confront yourself, the kind that rewrote how you saw people. Collins replayed every second of the stop in his mind. The flashing lights, her steady hands on the wheel, the calm tone she never lost, even when he raised his voice. She had given him every reason to see her clearly, and still he hadn't. He climbed back into his patrol car but didn't start the engine. Instead, he sat there, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that looked back wasn't that of a confident officer anymore. It was a man questioning the difference between enforcing the law and understanding justice. Somewhere across town, Colonel Maya Richardson was also silent, her car gliding smoothly down the highway. The anger she could have felt wasn't there, just a deep, steady exhaustion. She lived through far worse in her years of service, but there was something about these small, personal battles that strung in a way even combat couldn't touch. She loosened her grip on the steering wheel and sighed, her reflection in the rearview mirror catching the faint shine of her insignia. She thought about all the soldiers she'd trained, young men and women she'd told to always lead with integrity even when others don't. It was a lesson that echoed now in her own mind. Her phone buzzed softly on the passenger seat, a reminder of the meeting she was now late for. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Better late than sorry," she murmured, her voice low and tired. The incident hadn't ruined her day, but it had left a mark, a reminder that respect, for all her medals and years of service, was still something she sometimes had to earn twice, once for her country and once for her skin. As she approached the base gates, the guard on duty snapped to attention, saluting crisply. "Good morning, Colonel," he called out. Maya returned the salute with practiced precision, a small smile touching her lips. "Morning, Private," she replied. The moment was brief but grounding, a small, reassuring reminder that in some places, honor still meant what it should. Back on Maple Avenue, Collins finally turned the key in his ignition. The patrol car rumbled back to life, but he didn't drive off right away. His eyes drifted to the notepad on his dashboard blank, waiting for a report that would never be written. He thought about calling it in, about confessing that the routine stop had been anything but what would he say? That he'd pulled over a woman for no reason other than a gut feeling, and that gut feeling was wrong. There was no report code for humility. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed a few words, not for anyone else to see, but for himself. "Check your assumptions before your authority." He stared at the sentence for a long time, then locked his phone and set it aside. For the first time in years, the badge on his chest felt heavier than usual. It wasn't shame exactly, it was the weight of understanding, the kind that doesn't leave you the same once you've felt it. And somewhere, driving through the quiet rhythm of morning traffic, Colonel Richardson felt a similar shift, not in defeat, but in quiet victory. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't needed to. The truth had done the talking for her. Both of them, in their separate cars, carried something away from that encounter. For Collins, it was the beginning of reflection. For Maya, it was the continuation of endurance. Different roads, same lesson. Neither of them would forget that morning, not the flashing lights, not the silence, not the words that turned a moment of disrespect into a mirror held up to the heart. Every story, no matter how small, carries a lesson. And sometimes, the lessons we learn on quiet suburban streets speak louder than the ones learned in classrooms or command centers. What happened between Colonel Maya Richardson and Officer Collins wasn't just about a car, a uniform, or a misunderstanding. It was about something deeper, something woven into the way people see one another before they ever exchange a word. Bias doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. It looks like a second glance in a rearview mirror, a question that doesn't need to be asked. A doubt that slips in before reason catches it. It lives quietly, tucked behind politeness, disguised as procedure or instinct. And the most dangerous thing about it is that most people don't even realize when it's there. Colonel Richardson's experience is a mirror of countless others. Every day, people are stopped, questioned, or doubted, not for what they've done, but for who they appear to be. It's the extra scrutiny, the raised eyebrow, the subtle suspicion that says, "You don't belong here." But as her story showed, sometimes all it takes is truth and composure to turn that suspicion into awareness. She didn't shout, she didn't retaliate. she didn't let anger lead. Instead, she let truth and discipline speak for her, qualities honed through years of leadership and service. In that moment, her uniform wasn't just fabric and rank. It was a symbol of everything she'd given to a country that sometimes still questioned her place in it. And then there was Officer Collins. His mistake wasn't unique, but his reaction made all the difference. When faced with the truth, he didn't double down, he froze, he listened, and finally he learned. That's something many people never do, because change rarely begins with denial, it begins with discomfort. What makes this story powerful isn't the confrontation itself, but what came after. Two people from completely different walks of life stood face to face and reflected each other's humanity. One showed grace under pressure, the other learned humility through error. And in that brief intersection of lives, something shifted. A seed was planted, maybe small, but real. Bias, prejudice, and misunderstanding don't vanish overnight. They're unlearned over time, through moments like this, one conversation, one realization, one moment of pause before assumption. The truth is, most people don't set out to judge unfairly. They simply haven't been challenged to see beyond their lens. That's why stories like Maya's matter, because when we share them, they be our